Hey everybody! So I wanted to do a video, but I wanted to have my Christmas tree in, and I can't seem to, maybe like that. There's kind of a Christmas tree. I've been gone for a while because I've just been so busy with school. It's been insane. My semester's almost over, and then I'm going to be going home for the holidays and seeing Aspen, which is really exciting. But I just wanted to do a quick video, something that I've been meaning to get up, but I have never really had the chance or the time to do so. So I thought that I would talk a little bit about differences between vet school versus doing a PhD. So I know there's a lot of videos out there of people who have kind of chosen the vet school route, and there's not a lot that have put up videos about doing the PhD route instead. So my experience with it is I got into both PhD and vet schools. I have gotten into 2 vet schools and I got into 2 PhD programs before picking the one that I went with. And I just wanted to let you guys know why I chose a PhD versus vet school, and maybe if some of you are debating between the two, this will be helpful. So let's get started. Oh my goodness. The number of times that my furnace is turned on or that I am focusing on this screen versus looking at the lens, it's driving me nuts. So let's see if I can actually film this thing and get it done. I'm just going to talk about a few points that I think are important when you're deciding between a PhD or vet school. First of all, figuring out what animal you really want to work with. I think that's kind of key. Now I've got people walking above me. Sorry. I'm just going to continue. Yeah, take a look at what animals you really want to work with. So if you think that you know what you want to work with, go and work with other things. That was the thing that happened to me. I thought for the longest period of time that I was going to be a small animal vet, and then I worked with wildlife when I was 16, and it just was a game changer for me. So go and work with wildlife, work with large animals, animals in the agricultural industry, small animals, horses, whatever it may be. Work with a bunch of different animals so that you can figure out what job would be most interesting for you. From there, take a look at what jobs are available. So for me, after working with wildlife, I lied to myself for so long, saying that I was going to be a wildlife vet, and after really diving into job availability, you start to realize that jobs as vets in wildlife are few and far in between. It's very rare. So if you really like small animals and working with livestock animals, then a vet might be a good job for you, because jobs in the veterinary industry are really dictated by what people are willing to pay for. So a lot of people are willing to take care of their dogs and their cats. A lot of people are willing to take care of livestock animals because of food production, but there's not a lot of jobs out there for wildlife. There's also few jobs out there for horse vets, for equine vets. It really depends on what place you live in. So just take a look at job availability, and that really was something that helped change the path that I decided I was going to take. The next thing is figure out what is going to happen during your regular work days. So what I mean by this is, if you want to be a vet, if you think you want to be a vet, work in a vet clinic for a very long time. So I honestly, I don't think it's a good idea to go into vet school if you've only worked in a vet clinic for 6 months or a year. I honestly would work in a vet clinic at least for 2 years before going into vet school, just so that you understand what the job fully entails. So I didn't really start realizing that there were certain aspects of the job that I didn't like until after I had worked in clinics for even 4 years. You start to realize certain things, like if you're a small animal vet, you don't really get outside very often. If you're working in the vet industry at all, it's going to be dictated by what people can spend their money on. So I can't tell you how many vets I know now that came out of school and were so extremely frustrated because they didn't realize that even though they have all of this knowledge up here and they know what's going wrong with an animal, they can't treat an animal because of financial limitations for a person. And that is so frustrating if you know what's wrong but you can't help because of financial constraints. So if you haven't worked in a vet clinic that long, you might not know a lot of these different things, and it's very important before you spend 4 years in school just to get the doctor title to know exactly what is going to be involved with that job, because it's a lot of money and a lot of work that's going to go into getting you to that point. And you want to make sure that you really enjoy the job that you get. Now, a PhD will also get you a doctor title. So if that's what you want to go for, then, power to you. But it involves a lot of different things. So if you're trying to decide between the two, I would also recommend doing some work in a research setting. So approaching one of your professors during undergrad and seeing if you can maybe work in that kind of a setting. If you're more geared towards outdoor work, then try and do like a field season, which can be a lot of fun. So just make sure that you investigate all of the different routes before you decide. So a couple of things that turned me off of becoming a vet and kind of directed me more into the direction of being a scientist was, number one, I didn't like working indoors for the majority of my time. So I knew I wanted to work with wildlife. I knew I wanted to work outdoors. Job availability wasn't that great for wildlife vets. And so figuring out that there's actually potential to be a animal health scientist and working outdoors, doing epidemiological surveys and all of that kind of stuff with wildlife was eye-opening for me. Another thing is interacting with people. So for me, it was one of the most frustrating parts of a vet job was the fact that people don't necessarily have the same background as you when it comes to science. So explaining to people why, for example, you need to be seen by a vet and you need to get an infection diagnosed for a specific type of organism so that you can get proper antibiotics that are given to the animal was very frustrating. And the number of times that you will get yelled at by very mad people it's high. So you need to experience all of that before you go into a vet school and actually get a DVM or the equivalent of it. The other thing for me that was really important was travel. So I love travel. I wanted to be able to work in other countries, and a PhD is something that's going to transfer between countries much more easily. So you don't necessarily have to do all of these qualifying exams. If you move countries, depending on what country you move to, and you have a vet degree, you're going to have to do a bunch of qualifying exams to be able to practice in a different location, and it's going to cost you an insane amount of money. So that was one thing. And also I wanted a job that involved a lot of travel. So as a vet, you're going to probably be more, you're going to have more of a home base. So if that's something that you really like, if you want to be in one place, maybe open up your own business, then being a vet might be a good choice. If you want to travel a lot, as a scientist, you do that all the time. So you're constantly going to conferences, you're constantly presenting your own original research. It gives you opportunities to travel all over the world. So that was another big factor for me. So the reason why I decided to go into a PhD was travel, was availability of jobs in the field that I really want to focus on, and what else? Just like probably the fact that I'm not necessarily dictated on what I want to focus on by people's wallets. Like, I mean, science is kind of dictated by that because you apply for grants and stuff, but you apply for work that you really want to do, like your own research that you are really passionate about. And if you get grants for that, then great, and you just have at her and you do what you want to do. So that was a very alluring thing for me. The next thing that you have to consider is costs for school. So let's just be real here. Vet school costs a lot of money. You're going to be lucky if you get out of vet school with $120,000 of debt-ish to $150,000. I know people that have gotten out with $200,000 of debt. You can't work while you're going to vet school. It's a crazy 4 years. So you really have to be willing to take that hit and be saddled with that kind of debt afterwards. As a PhD, you can get positions where you're paid. So I'm paid for doing research with wildlife, and I will most likely come out of my degree with absolutely no debt. Nothing. That's important because both routes are going to take a lot of time. Just because you may be wanting to look into having a family or buying a house, being more financially stable, and being saddled with that kind of debt might be very hard in the first few years while you try and pay that off as a vet. So cost of school is a big thing. The next thing is just the difference that you can make. So you really want to consider at what scale you want to make a difference. Like when you're looking back at your life, at the end of your life, what do you really want to say you did? And as a vet, you're going to be working more on an individual scale, on a smaller scale at the individual level. So you're going to be looking at animals and helping make an impact in each one of their lives. You're probably going to know your clients and your patients very closely, and you're just going to have more of a personal one-on-one connection with each person or animal that you make a difference with. As a scientist, on the other hand, you're not going to have that individual one-on-one level. It's going to be on a much wider scale. So you're going to see changes in populations. So at a very large scale, usually. You're going to make a difference at the individual level, but you're probably not going to see that as much. So you really want to figure out if that's kind of what you want to be proud of at the end of your life versus the, individual animals that you made an impact with. So for me, at the end of my life, I hope that I can look back and say that I figured out a bunch of diseases that were at a risk for human and animal populations. I hope that I made a big change in endangered species and helping deal with, certain pathogens or organisms that could deplete populations and endangered animals. That kind of stuff is what I really want to dedicate my life to, versus making a more individual change in animals, right? I would rather see a much larger population level change for me personally. But some people really connect with that one-on-one and that individual level. So if that's something that you love, that's great. And we need people that do both. So neither one is better than the other. It's just what you personally enjoy most. Because in the end, you want something that isn't a job, right? You want to love the work that you do. So figure out what you enjoy most, and then that's going to help you make a decision. And this is a very big decision. So it takes a lot of time. Take your time, figure out really what animals you want to work with, if it's worth you coming out with a lot of debt, because one direction involves a lot of debt, the other one doesn't necessarily involve that much. And what scale of impact you want to see your life making. If you love that individual one-on-one, maybe a vet position is better for you. if you love that large scale and being, acknowledged for huge impact in a certain field, then probably a PhD and working as a animal health scientist or something like that is more geared towards what you want to come from your life and your work. So I'm gonna go before my furnace kicks in or before I hear any footsteps upstairs or whatever it may be. But I hope that this was really helpful for you guys, and good luck with it all. I'm gonna go and work on a presentation that I have this coming week. Yay! All right.